one more time with your first and last name, and then spell it out for us.
Okay. My name is Flora Ward. That's Floraward.
Great. And where are we today? Just like where the location?
So we are in the reading room of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania at 1300 Locust Street.
Okay, that's good.
It's my tour guide voice.
And can you just give us a little bit, a brief, like a synopsis of the project, an overview of the project? What is it?
So Audience Embedded is about trying to bring in audience members of our community, to help devise programming based on archival material.
That's great. And then who are the two groups that are participating?
So we're bringing together folks from the community of Taya Puertorriqueño and the folks from the community of the Historical Society. So bringing them together in this group.
And I know there's past members and advisors. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the PAZ members, that stands for Program Audience Zoomers, so they zoom in on the collections. The PAZ members are the 20 or so people who we just had our little first session with upstairs. They are the folks who were recruited from our respective communities. And the advisors are a group of specialists who are either public historians or artists or program specialists from area cultural institutions who at various times along the course of this year-long project will come in and offer their expertise to help our PAZ members in the process of coming up with ideas for programming based on the archival material they've looked at.
Fantastic. And why audience embedded?
Why audience embedded? Well, it's a way of reversing the usual top-down way that programming is devised within cultural organizations, where you have somebody whose job it is to come up with a program that the people will want. So instead of doing that kind of top-down model, the idea is to reverse it and go sort of bottom-up, where we get people to tell us what they want, and then we do what they say. So it's a kind of reversal of the usual order of things.
That's fantastic. And what was the need that HSP and Bayer saw to address with this project, or like what was the?
Sure. So there are some selfish reasons as organizations and some more altruistic reasons. The selfish side would be that both of us are always looking to expand our audiences to speak to and be relevant to more people. So we bring more people through our doors and we can survive and thrive as organizations in this city. The more altruistic reason is that both of us have a lot of incredible history and resources about Latino Philadelphia, and we want them to be better known to the community at large. Particularly, I think now in the environment that we live in, where ideas of ethnicity, identity, immigration, and culture are so fraught with political difficulty, it becomes more and more important to understand the history, to confront it face to face, and to integrate it into our daily lives in a way that's meaningful.
Great. So that you actually just answered the second question. Which was, why do you think this is important?
Well, there you go.
Thank you.
Sure.
And can you describe a little bit of what happened today with the groups?
Sure. So the goal of today's session was really to introduce the project to the group of PAZ members that we've assembled, and for the PAZ members to get to know one another, because we want this to be a collaborative process where we learn from one another in a non-hierarchical way. It's meant to be collaborative. So a big part of it is, since we're bringing together folks from Tayer's community and HSP's community, we want them to get to know each other. We want our communities to blend, if you will. So the main goal today was introductions to one another, as well as to the collections at HSP. So we kind of divided it in half. The first half was spent talking amongst ourselves, making introductions, and then the second half we spent introducing the collection at HSP and then coming down here to the reading room to look at a few sample documents of the kind of work people can do in the archives.
That's great. And any surprises?
Honestly, the biggest surprise for me was I knew we'd have a really interesting group of people. I just didn't realize how interesting this group of people would be. I mean, my goodness, when everyone was going through and kind of telling the group a bit about themselves, I was just so impressed by the wealth of knowledge, experience, connections, insight that this group of people is going to have. And I felt quite inadequate, like, wow, who am I to be the facilitator when there are these people who are literally have lived the history that we're going to be talking about. So I was, just for myself, just pleasantly surprised by the incredible group of people we've got here.
Fantastic. Anything else?
No.
That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure.
See, that wasn't too bad.
No. Y'all are nice.
If you can just we're gonna stay quiet for like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, just so we can get some of the room tone. And then I'm just gonna kind of go like this, just to kind of get the eye level. And if you can start by telling me your first and last name and spell it out for me.
Right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whitney Lopez, WHITNEY LOPEZ.
And that's just so I can get the spelling right.
It's totally fine.
And what did you have for breakfast? And this is just so I can get my audio levels.
I had Cheerios for breakfast this morning.
Much better than what I had. I had coffee and like a pastry.
That's a good breakfast.
Yeah. I would prefer the Cheerios. There we go. All right. And then, what's your role so far?
I'm the project archivist for the Audience Embedded program here at the Historical Society.
Okay. And you already mentioned it. Can you tell us and the other thing? Oh, the one thing I forgot to mention is whenever I ask you a question.
Oh, you want me to put it into the answer?
Put it into the answer.
Sorry.
No,
I can do that one again.
No, well, I was gonna ask you where are we today?
Oh, where are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
that was gonna be the first question.
Sorry.
No,
sorry.
not
Okay.
at all. Okay, so where are we today?
We're at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, located at 1300 Locust Street.
Okay, that's perfect. And what are we doing here?
So today is a study day for members of the PAZ group, which is part of the Audience Embedded program here at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. It's a collaboration between the Historical Society and Taller Puertorriqueño in North Philadelphia.
Fantastic. And what are some of the things that the PAZ members are looking at?
So right now, some of the PAZ members are here for the study day, looking through some of the objects and materials that are in the Latino collection here at the Historical Society. It's part of what they need to be doing in order to develop programming later for the two organizations.
Fantastic. And is there anything that has come up that you're like, oh, or like that have any of the members have come up to you and showed you that they were really interested about? Or it's just been like everybody's just like taking it on?
I think right now people are mostly taking things in. There was something during the March 3rd meeting that was here. There was one woman who was very interested in learning about a relationship between the United States and Chile, actually, which she found in the collection. It's not necessarily something we would be using since the current program is about Puerto Rican history in Philadelphia, but she was very interested in it and she hopes to be able to come back at a later time to work on it herself here.
Oh, that's fantastic. I also remember something from the third. Some members found some slides. Can you tell me a little bit about the slides?
Sure. So the slides that we were looking at, which were selected prior to them coming, were slides of 3 artists in North Philadelphia at the intersection of Cambria Street and 5th Street. They were creating a mural about Puerto Rican culture. So the mural is a picture of an African person, a Taino person, and a Spaniard. And so it was created by 3 artists. I can't remember all of their names, but they were looking at slides of the artists creating the mural. So the woman who pointed out the slides, she actually knew those artists who were making the mural. So she was able to connect us to who was who in each of the photos.
That's cool, and I think that's one of the really cool parts about so far that I've noticed is that there's people that have lived through the history of Taller, and that you don't have to do, well, you still have to do the research, right? But it's like you can connect things so quickly, right?
Absolutely. That was actually a really great learning moment for me because I'm not familiar with the artists, but I'm familiar with the work and I'm familiar with the history of the mural. And so when I was going through the archives prior to the PAZ group members coming here, I saw the administrative side of it where people were trying to get the artists paid and where the artists had submitted their proposal for the mural. And then I also saw the slides of them creating the mural, but I didn't know who was who in the pictures because of the slides weren't labeled with their names. So having someone who knew them and lived there and helped to create Taller, explain who everyone was in the photos, helped me personally to connect the administrative work to the slides too.
That's pretty cool. What do you think it's important to do work like this? Like, what is there? Um, how do you see like the two institutions connecting? You know, how does it develop?
Well, for me personally, I think that it's important for large institutions like the Historical Society to partner with smaller community organizations like Taller, because a lot of times people who are from the communities like that feel left out of larger institutions. So it's good that folks can come here to see themselves in the archives and know that their stories matter within the larger scheme of society. And it's also important that they be able to see themselves in the archives of the local organization too. So that's one of the reasons why I think that this kind of work is really important.
Cool. Anything else that you think would be interesting to just capture right now on video that you've noticed or about the project itself? Yeah, you have to. No,
It's a good question. I mean, it's not necessarily like completely project related, but for me, something that I think would be a great thing to come out of this project, if possible, I don't know if there's wiggle room for it, would be an oral history with the folks here and also the folks who were helping to establish Taller Puertorriqueño as an organization who were also part of the participants here. It would be nice to hear their history and their knowledge and hopefully capture it as part of this project as well.
and I think that's actually really. I was thinking about something similar because I know one of the younger members. I don't remember her name.
Masada?
I think it was Masada. Yeah. I mean, her mom. Like they grew up with the organization from when they were
Exactly.
very little, and she has the perspective of the organization being there. And I mean, there's so many like generational components to this.
Exactly.
That I thought it was pretty cool.
Same.
Okay. Awesome. That's it. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool. No problem.
But before we begin, tell me what you had for breakfast so I can get my other levels.
I had a bagel for breakfast. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty simple.
Okay. And then can you tell me your first name and last name and spell it out for me?
My name is Masada, Masada, Divine, Devine.
Okay. Cool. And can you tell me where we are today?
We are at the African American Museum.
Great. And can you tell me a little bit of what you saw here today?
I saw an exhibition by Betty Lanecraft, which was really cool. I really enjoyed that a lot. I learned more about African Americans in Philadelphia, like a lot of stuff I didn't know. And I learned a lot of new people that I never heard of. I saw a lot of really cool artwork by different African American artists.
And why are you here?
I'm here because I'm part of the PAZ program, and I work at Taller, so I came today because of that.
And is this? I know like you guys are doing a couple of trips somewhere. Why are you guys doing the trips?
We're doing the trips to help us get more ideas and brainstorm about the end goal of the program, and just kind of brainstorm and so we can have more information to get more ideas.
That's cool. And what did anything stand out from today's exhibition? Or the exhibits or anything in particular?
Betty, yeah, she's done some work with Taller before, so it's really cool. But I've never like heard her like story or anything, so that was really cool. That stood out to me. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Anything that you think the group would get from these specific things that they saw here today, or that you can think of, like you can make connections from some of the stuff that you've been already doing? And
Yeah, it's really similar to the stuff that we've been studying now, and I think this will definitely help me brainstorm about our ideas and getting to know like the background of our history.
yeah, no, that actually, I thought it was very similar because
Yeah.
like. When she was talking about like the neighborhoods and going through the archives
Yeah.
and looking for photos and like these narratives, so it sounds like a lot of the stuff that you've been doing at the
Yeah.
Historical Society and at the year too. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else that you would like to add?
No.
Cool. That's it. Thank you. Cool. Questions. At the beginning, I just like to ask people for their first name and last name, just so I can get who you are, and also to spell it out for me, just so I can know how to spell it. Because I won't know.
My name is Zach, Z-A-C, Steele, S-T-E-E-L-E.
And then, can you just tell me very briefly what you guys did today?
Today we were looking at the recommendations for taking the process and also the content of what we've worked on as a group over this time, and thinking about the actual format of presentation and giving feedback on that.
Great. And then, just looking back, and you don't have to look at the camera.
Yeah, that's why I'm looking down.
Yeah, no, you can look at me if you want.
Okay, it's just that there's like a little red light there.
Oh, this
So
one?
yeah.
Here, let me give a, because that's probably bothering. Give me
Yeah.
that.
If you can block that, that's fine. There you go. Perfect.
Okay. Can you just tell me, looking back at the field trips, at the meetings, presenters, what was a highlight for you? If you have 2 highlights, that's great.
Sure. I guess I really appreciated kind of building my context in terms of historical events in the North Philly neighborhood, because I was invited into the project because I had worked with HSP before as a teacher, but I teach Latino and African American studies, and I have worked for years to build a course that looked at issues of race and identity for students in North Philadelphia, and have been wanting to find other ways to connect directly to community histories. And I really appreciated over the summer, I took a walking tour that we walked around to different sites in the neighborhood and learned about the history of particularly the Puerto Rican community, but some other events that had affected other communities in North Philadelphia. And I found that very powerful, and it made me think about ways I could connect my students into the neighborhood. And then I also really appreciated when, I forget his name, but he's a scholar also who had done a lot of work on looking at Puerto Rican North Philadelphia, and just hearing that and making connections between those two experiences I really enjoyed that.
That's awesome. And why do you think it's important to reflect on the history?
I mean, I think primarily for 2 reasons. I think that, well, I understand that. I think for students who are learning about history, the process of understanding how historical truths are created, in the sense that when we're looking at the past, there is no one narrative. We're simply working through what we find. And so I think what that means, both for young people and adults, is that the present and who has power in the present and who's shaping the narrative or putting particular context onto events that happened in the past is actually what comes out in what's presented, right? So when we're actually, although history is a real fact, when we're actually doing history, what happened in the past and what's happening in the present is entangled. We can't really separate the two. And I think, for students, it's important to be able to do history and understand that there's always multiple interpretations. And I think for adults, I mean, this program is mainly geared towards adults in the product that we discussed today. I think it's important for people to think about how and why and who has control of the historical narrative. And I think many of us in this project hope that whatever is created really is not just our creation, but it is something that the community can own. And that, I mean, there are questions of who has the power in constructing the narrative, but I hope that, particularly at Taller Puertorriqueño, because I know the history of that organization and really as a place where a lot of activism has happened to promote the well-being of the North Philly Latino community, that there's a sense of ownership about being able to own and then show this history to that community. And I think that process of owning one's own history is powerful. And I also think that part of the reason why this grant happened and brought together both Latino stakeholders and then white people and people who might be Latino but from outside of the community is because we're at another juncture point because of our political situation where past stories of migrant experiences or even who owns the narrative and what that means in terms of the type of racism and discrimination that's going on today is important. It's important to hear those stories. So I think that the idea of bringing people together was sort of through the process to model maybe a little bit of collaboration, and maybe in that way some political commentary on what's happening today as well in the United States.
Awesome. And just kind of to wrap up, is there anything else that you didn't cover that you think is important for people to know, either about the process or something that you would change about the project and of the way it was conducted?
I mean, I think it was powerful, and I like the idea of a collaborative process to basically present history, because then that does speak about, well, how does the content get produced, right? And that's ultimately what becomes the historical narrative. I don't know how they went about choosing the people who participated. I appreciated being part of it. I think it would have been really interesting if the majority of people who participated were directly from the community, because I feel like there was some, again, I don't know how they chose people, but this person's an expert and this person's expert. But I think that speaks to, again, is an expert somebody who has knowledge that may not be firsthand, or is an expert somebody who's lived an experience? So I think they could have played around with that notion and maybe invited more people from the community and whose lived experiences might speak in different ways to the types of materials that were found. I think they did try to do that by bringing in people from Taller, so I think they were moving in that direction. But I thought it was really interesting to kind of at least begin, although there were some, to kind of decontextualize, well, these are just experts who sit in the archives and then piece together these stories. So I think they could open that door a little bit more. but I think that the effort was a good effort, and it was interesting to me to kind of, as somebody who has taught history, to see how people in museums and in archives think about how they're going to present historical information to the public, and how the form that the presentation takes can be as important as the content itself.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Spell.
Sure.
His name in just so it's in the same shot, so I can just copy and paste it pretty much. So tell me your first name, last name, and spell it out for me.
Sure. So my name is Jeremy Gallion. First name is Jeremy. Last name Gallion is Gallion.
And then if you can just briefly tell me just what you guys did today, just like in a couple sentences. What did you guys do today?
Sure. Today we went over the final program proposal between HSP and Taller Puertorriqueño and discussed the some possible concerns about having a digital history project.
Perfect. And then just looking back at the past couple months, because it's been almost a year since you guys started formally meeting.
Yeah, it's been a while.
The time has really flown by, I think. Looking at some of the field trips that you might have gone to, some of the presenters that you got to listen to, what was a highlight for you? Or like even looking into the archives, what was a highlight for you?
I'd say there's two highlights. So one was actually like getting to hear and encountering like Puerto Rican voices in the history of Philadelphia. So like in Taller's archive, there is definitely a lot of oral history project that I found very interesting. And I don't think that these are well-documented voices and well-documented histories. So just to get a better understanding of the lived experiences of Puerto Ricans in this town was really good. And particularly the very particular ways that they were racialized within Philadelphia, which, at least from my research, is different, is a little bit different from how it was nationally. The second was definitely the trip to the Italian market, where I met amazing Puerto Rican artists who took us around and showed us her neighborhood. And just knowing just like the integration of just like Latinx culture in general in that part of town was fantastic.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, actually, you're the third person to say that, that they like the field trip, which I think it was very important because you get to, like, when you're having the discussions upstairs or at the year, it's very abstract in a way because you're not looking at things, and just having a discussion with like being in the setting, I think is really cool. And you know, through the discussions, why do you think it's important to reflect on history? Just simple question. I know.
It's an interesting one. It's one I grapple with as someone who like researches the history of Chicanx peoples in the U.S. But I think like researching history is a way to understand narrative and how is a driving force in a lot of our lives, but also a driving force in how we understand and produce knowledge. So understanding larger historical narratives teach us more about the present than anything else, but they also teach us how we relate to one another, but also to the past.
That's awesome. And this is very similar to this question is similar to this past one. Why do you think places like HSP and Taller should keep archives?
Ooh, that's a great one. Well, I mean, archives, I think, are a practical necessity for almost anything. I mean, the bigger thing is like all digital media is just a giant archive, right? Databases. So I think it's important that the representation of very particular histories and identities are safeguarded and kept for knowledge production in the future. I think it's important. Oh, you want me to cut that?
No, I think can you hear it? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I got it.
Yeah, I got it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so we'll start again.
Sure.
Let me just refocus.
Yeah. So while he's doing that, I'll ask him a question again. So why do you think places like HSP and Taller should keep archives? And if you can actually just wrap that question in your answer, that would be really helpful.
Okay. So I think HSP and Taller should continue to keep archives because, one, they're a practical necessity, just for documenting the history and lived experience of Puerto Ricans and other peoples here in Philadelphia. But it's also important because there are so few avenues to encounter knowledge or lived experiences of Latinx peoples here in Philly. And to have an institution as big as HSP to hold that for public viewing, right, is very, very important. But it's also equally important to have it within the hands of those Latinx populations themselves. So I think that Taller holding its own archive, right, allows them to safeguard the narrative and around their own histories, right, and also influence what within the community can and should be archived, rather than leaving it up to dominant forces, right? For so long, there was no Latinx representation in U.S. archives, and that was very purposeful. So to have it as within the community, right, is fantastic.
And then, again, reflecting back at the project, the process, what would be something that you do differently, either for the research, or you would suggest that the project should have addressed, or something?
I wish the project would have addressed more the history of the racialization of Puerto Ricans here in Philadelphia. It tried, as much as we were talking about a particular like ethnic and racial community, the history of how they were treated, both their legal, both within the law and within general society, was addressed, but we didn't really dive in. And I think like a deep dive would have kind of changed the emphasis on the spots in the archive that we were looking at. A lot of it was on economics, but I wasn't quite sure what that meant when, like, the real history we're looking at is economic discrimination, right? What jobs were available, not what people were doing. So I think like that inflection would have been really interesting to kind of explore.
That's cool, because maybe they can use that to do like a deep dive, like a little focus project. It's kind of cool. And anything else that you would like to, people to know or that we didn't cover?
I think just the importance of contemporary Puerto Rican voices is very, very important and should be an emphasis. I encountered a lot of them in the past, and a lot of those narratives were just solely focused on immigration, almost as if Puerto Rico was not a constituent part of the U.S. It got wrapped up into these other like bigger narratives around immigration, but it's not the same, right? Because Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. But I was really interested in like shifting the focus to current lived experiences, or at least within the last 30 years, to really get an understanding of how people are living, right? What does it mean to be Puerto Rican in Philly now, right? What are the opportunities? How have those changed? So it's interesting. Like, we archive the present all the time, and I think that could have been a little more upfront.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I always like to ask everybody just for their name and to spell it out for me, because I don't know how to spell your name. And it's much easier if it's all in one place. So if you can tell me your first name, last name, and spell it out for me.
Certainly. I'm Rosanna, and that's Rossana, and Jaffe, Jaffe, Rosanna Jaffe.
Perfect. And you don't have to look at this. You can just look
Okay.
at me. No, because it's too scary looking. And so if you can just very briefly tell me what you guys did today, just in a couple sentences.
Today we went over the proposal for the events that they're planning, and how it's going to be, rather than more in-person events, that it's going to be more digital, online component.
Perfect. And looking back at the past year, because it's almost been a year since you guys started meeting formally. Looking at the field trips, some of the meetings, some of the presenters, what was like a highlight for you? Something that you took from the process?
The highlight for me were the field trips, especially the one with Michelle Ortiz. It was phenomenal. I'm still shocked that we got to do something like that. It was wonderful because we got to not just meet her, but we were in her home with her relatives, looking at photos, walking around her neighborhood, just so personal, into a personal insight into her life, but not just her life, but generations of lives coming to Philadelphia.
Well, how do you think that might be important for this project, like the outcome of this project, if there's an outcome?
Uh, the the relevance is just to know the personal stories. And that's what we've been learning throughout this. That about, like, for example, the recordings that were done 40 years ago or more than 40 years ago. And again, they're personal stories that grab you, with the tobacco farms that we had here. Who knew? How many people knew? And unless your relatives were involved in it, you probably didn't know.
Yeah, no, no, it definitely, I feel like, to me, as an observer, it took it from an abstract idea from the meetings to something that's actually, it involves real people, it involves real stories, and throughout the whole thing, you're reflecting on history, right? What do you why do you think it might be important to reflect on history?
The history is so critical. It helps us move forward. It helps us hopefully not repeat the same mistakes, and it just tells people where they came from. It's the history of a group of people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, because this is kind of related to that question, why do you think places like HSP and Taller should keep archives?
Archives, again, how can I believe the history you're telling me if you don't show me something? And when people are no longer around, that history is then lost if you don't have it archived in some way. And sadly, we're losing history every day because HSP can't go out there and save everything. Nor was everything saved from the past, which is unfortunate because there are many stories that we're not finding out.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then, just reflecting back at this past couple months, if there was something that you could do differently, what would you do it or what would be something that you think would inform the project differently than what was already done?
Really, this project was well done. I know that they thought about it very carefully. I wish we had more time to explore, more time to research, more time during our meetings, because our meetings seem so crammed with dialogue and ideas. So
Yeah,
that's what I would do.
I noticed that too. Anything else that you would want to say about the process, about the field trips, about anything that you would want somebody to know from this that I didn't ask or didn't touch?
I just want to express gratitude. When I was initially contacted, I really didn't understand what I was being contacted about, and I didn't know, because I didn't understand what I was being contacted about, I didn't know if I wanted to participate. And I just want to say that this has been a very enlightening process. Like, who knew? First of all, I had no idea of the collaboration that is being done through this project with Dasher. I had never been to Dasher. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the people I've gotten to meet within the PAZ group, and to see the work and the ideas that they're thinking of doing in the future.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's it. It wasn't painful, right?
Because I don't like video games like that. My video games are war games. I always said, every time you do that killing and that shooting, you know, when that part is broken, label the piece. And then the kids will actually learn.
So, I mean, basically, actually, can you tell me your first name and last name and spell it out? And that's so I can know how to spell it, because I don't know how to spell it.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead.
My name is Marilyn. It's Marioyn. Rodriguez. Rogriguez.
Okay, perfect. And can you tell me just what, very briefly, what you did today?
Today, we kind of closed our 2-year program. It didn't feel like 2 years, but more or less we came to conclusion of what we were doing with the whole year with PAZ, which is finalizing that we're going to probably end up doing something with the web and something that pertains to the history of Puerto Rico, but also make it friendly where a youth could be attracted to it.
Perfect. And just looking back to this, because it was like maybe it's been a year, like since you formally started meeting.
Yeah.
What were some and going on the research trips, going to the museum, going to the Italian market, where's the mural tour? I don't know if you, because some people came, some people didn't come to all of them.
No, I did all of them.
What was something that was like a highlight for you from the process?
The one thing that highlighted for me was the Italian tour. I know the Italian area well, but I didn't know all the history that Michelle shared. I love the artwork on the awnings. I think that was an awesome thing to do. I won't mind doing something like that in the city because we have so many Latino markets now that we have awnings about the stores. And I think that would be actually kind of cool to document the history.
That's pretty cool. And like just thinking back of the archives and like the archives here, why do you think it's important to reflect on history?
Because history is never passed on, and if we don't enforce
Can you
it,
actually just include, like, I think it will be important. It's important to highlight history or reflect on history. Just wrap it in there so I can cut it. Actually, use it. So just say, I think it's important to reflect on history because.
oh, you want to use the phrase?
Yeah.
Okay.
So go ahead.
I think it's important to reflect on history because it's something that we need to pass on to our generations, our youth, and more so because sometimes the youth that are outside today in the world don't even have some parents or grandparents to get that history. So moving forward, I think that's important.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And why do you think? Well, it's kind of a similar question, but why do you think HSP and Taller should keep archives?
To keep the history alive. I mean, I was actually surprised that HSP had a Latino archive, so that was new to me. That was my new experience here. Even the place is pretty amazing. It's pretty large. It's a library, but it's also very archival, which is important. And then those tours that I did, like I didn't know the history about some of the Latino organizations that I already know. That was interesting because my mom worked in one of them. I didn't know that history prior to that. She was just basic, some of the organizations move around a lot. But learning all that history, especially in my neighborhood, was really important for me.
That's pretty good. And if you were going to do this again, what would you do differently? Like something that you would.
Well, if I would do this again, I would definitely invite more people of the community and more young people.
Anything else that you think would be important for people to know? About the process, about, the archives, about, the group meetings, anything that stands out.
The one thing that I would say to stand out, the word history is kind of scary. So I would just encourage people not to stay away from history. People tend to run away when they hear something historical. And I like the idea that we're going to do some oral reports because people also like to listen, not just read. So that moving forward, I think is important as well.
Yeah, and I think it's also important because some people don't know how to read. Or
Oh, that's so true. My grandmother doesn't know how to read, and she loves hearing stuff.
So I think it would be important.
Very important. And she's part of that history as well. My grandmother just passed on Monday. She was 99 years old.
Oh, sorry.
We're actually going to get ready to do a nice memorial service. Mm-hmm. And speaking of history, we all sat down and recorded her just like we're doing here right now. She had over 50 family members sitting in a circle listening to her talk. She don't speak English, so now we got to translate everything into English. I might call you for that, by the way. Help me with the editing. But like I said, history is really important, especially getting from your generations. So that history that we're developing is going to pass on to the other generations in our family, the little ones that are coming into this world right now, because they didn't have the chance to meet her.
That's important. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, sir. Take
Placer.
care.